Welcome everyone to Things Around 8. Dear friends, in this video we will talk about Iran's promise to respond to the Israeli attack, which in turn was a response to an Iranian attack. This cycle of responses and counter-responses is the harbinger of an open war in the Middle East. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and click on the notification bell so you don't miss any news. The recent confrontation between Iran and Israel is the direct result of a series of strategic Israeli strikes. In recent weeks, Israel has been held responsible for the elimination of key figures in the anti-Israel alliance. Ismail Hania, leader of Hamas, Hassan Nasrallah, leader of Hezbollah, and Abbas Nuforushan, Iranian commander of the Revolutionary Guards. Iran, in response to these attacks, launched missiles at Israel, in an action that marked a serious escalation in tension between the two countries. In response to this Iranian attack, Israel launched a series of precise and targeted airstrikes in the early hours of October 26, focused on military sites deep inside Iranian territory. It did not touch nuclear facilities or oil infrastructure, which are considered Iran's strategic treasures. This decision by Israel was calculated to inflict damage on Iran's military capabilities without provoking uncontrolled retaliation. Targets such as Iranian missile factories and air defense systems were hit, demonstrating Israel's ability to respond without violating certain unspoken limits that could escalate the conflict into open war. Iran, for its part, described the damage as limited. However, it made a statement that it was obliged to defend itself against acts of aggression. Experts point out that the use of words such as obligation and right suggests that Iran is in a delicate position, trying to maintain its internal image of strength, while avoiding a response that could trigger a greater escalation. The tone of Iran's statements may indicate that Tehran, although frustrated, does not want to escalate the conflict at this time. The United States has played a crucial role in pressuring Israel to adopt a posture of proportional retaliation. This intervention is part of a broader U.S. policy to prevent its allies from engaging in a conflict that could further destabilize the Middle East. The U.S. goal appears to be to contain an escalation that could involve multiple countries and draw in Iranian proxies in places such as Iraq and Lebanon. It is worth noting that the U.S. military presence in the region has been greatly increased recently, which has also acted as a deterrent against Iran. The UK and other Western countries have expressed concern about the possibility of a continued cycle of retaliation. An escalation in the Middle East would not only threaten regional security but could also harm international trade, since Iran has strategic access to the Strait of Hormuz, through which much of the world's oil passes. These allies have encouraged both sides to seek diplomatic alternatives to resolve their differences, pointing out that regional stability is in the global interest. In this way, Western countries are trying to exert diplomatic influence, although the success of such pressure is uncertain, given the history of confrontations in the region. Iran's stance of resisting foreign pressure is reflected in its actions and rhetoric. The Iranian government faces a tension between demonstrating strength to its domestic audience and responding to the expectations of the international community. How Iran navigates these two objectives will determine not only the next step in its relationship with Israel, but also its future diplomatic interactions with global powers, such as the United States, the European Union, and even Russia. This context reinforces Iran's central role as a major player in Middle Eastern geopolitics, especially when considering its continued support for anti-Israel proxies in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. What we are seeing is a model of conflict that can be described as retaliatory warfare, where both sides carefully measure their responses to avoid full-blown escalation. This border war is the result of years of confrontation and retaliation that have created a tacit understanding between Israel and Iran about which targets are acceptable and which would cross a dangerous line. The Israeli strike, which avoided Iran's nuclear and oil infrastructure, is a clear sign of this strategy. Both countries know that a full-blown escalation could easily spiral out of control, drawing in allies and turning the Middle East into a battlefield of brutal proportions. The Iranian government has already stated that a proportionate response will be taken, but what that means in practice remains unclear. Observers speculate that Iran may opt for an indirect attack using allies such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, or militias in Iraq to target Israeli or U.S. interests in the region. This tactic would allow Iran to retaliate without directly violating Israeli territory, avoiding an escalation that could lead to even more intense attacks on its own territory. This type of response, however, also involves risks and could increase the involvement of other countries such as Saudi Arabia and even Russia, which have interests in the stability of the region. Looking ahead, we see that the diplomatic options for both parties are limited, but international pressure for de-escalation could result in negotiations, even if indirect. An important factor to consider is the upcoming election in the United States, which could redefine American policy in the Middle East. If an administration less committed to Israel takes power, this could change the United States' support for preemptive and deterrent strikes by Israel. Iran, on the other hand, is watching this scenario carefully, as a change in the White House could alter its threat perceptions and future actions. The world is closely following Iran's response, a response that, if not well calculated, will start a cycle of attacks and counterattacks with the potential to plunge the entire region into war. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bells so you don't miss any news.